Supposed to remind me. Okay. Take for example, for instance, the following. There is a marker on a rock near the top of Mount Washington, marking the spot where a woman climber lay down and died. She was so close to the top that she could almost hit it with a stone. 100 steps more, and she would have reached the shelter she sought. But she did not know this. Disheartened, distressed in spirit, she was at the end of her courage, so she could not see what was ahead of her. So she lay down and died 100 steps from her goal. 100 steps from her goal, from reaching the top of Mount Washington. That's better. How sad is that? So close and yet so far. Almost making it, but never doing so. How much sadder for Christians who lose all hope and give up, never to attain that final victory. Now contrast that with the thoughts of D.L. Moody, a Bible scholar who penned these words. Someday you will read in the papers that D.L. Moody of East Northfield is dead. Don't you believe a word of it. At that moment I shall be more alive than I am now. I shall have gone up higher, that is all. Out of this old clay tenement into a house that is immortal. A body that death cannot touch, that sin cannot taint. A body fashioned like unto his glorious body. I was born in the flesh in 1837. I was born into the spirit in 1856. That which is born of the flesh may die. That which is born of the spirit will live forever. This morning's sermon is titled Happily Ever After. And together we'll take a look at what happens to Christians who persevere and also what it takes to do so. In Timothy 4:6, Paul has the following to say, For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Paul knew that his end was imminent, but he was ready for it. He had endured and finished the race, and he knew the result was a happily ever after at the feet of the Father. I like that analogy Paul used because I used to be a half-marathon runner previously. I know the exaltation experience in what seems like a mountain, and by the way sometimes is, at the beginning of the day, is eventually conquered. But finishing any race takes conquering, competing and completing. Now you may think that's kind of strange. Why would I say conquering, then competing, and then completing? Because conquering, for me, happens at the beginning of a race, before the race ever begins. The real conquering is the changing of attitude, of learning, training, and discipline. Once that has been accomplished, the conquering is already done, and the rest is relatively easy by comparison. So let's look at the 3 things needed to successfully complete any race. Number 1 is the conquering. The very first thing that a runner has to do is to decide to take the challenge on in the first place. And we've probably all heard it say that the first step is often the hardest. And that is true. That's why I put conquering first. You have to conquer everything in your life that up to then has told you that running a marathon is an idiotic idea. And sometimes, honestly, in the middle of it, you begin to think that again. It takes mental fortitude to give up sweets, lazy afternoons, and a sedentary lifestyle. But it all begins with a single moment of attitude adjustment. I have to get off this. Do you mind if I take this off for a while I'm here? I have to get off this couch now. I have to take that first step, and I have to begin to move. Joshua said the following in 24:15, and that illustrates the point for us. Choose this day whom you will serve. Now he was talking about gods versus the God of Israel and our God. But we have to make the same choice. Serve the world and it's God of self-absorption, egocentrism, and laziness. Or the disciplined and dedicated approach to training our spiritual minds and bodies for the race that's coming and the eventual prize. Not doing so only leads to failure. Beginning the race with bravado and gusto, as so many Christians do on the day that they are baptized, only to fail shortly thereafter when the difficulty of that chosen lifestyle becomes all too apparent. When I was a youth minister, we would go to camp. Got nothing wrong with kids being baptized at camp, don't get me wrong. But I know from experience that the first 3 or 4 days, we get there the Saturday, the Sunday, the Monday, Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday, the first child is baptized. Genuinely has been thinking about it, studying. But then the floodgates of baptism opens. And suddenly, 8, 10, 12 kids all want to be baptized the following night, or sometimes even the same night. So we end up baptizing 20 or 30 kids. But the reality of that is that not all of them were genuinely trained for that moment. They just did it because everybody else was doing it. Now I can tell you that I've seen people begin a race. You be standing in the front and you're looking around and you can hear somebody say, "Oh, this is my first race ever. I haven't even trained for it." Trust me when I tell you they were not going to make the end. They would quit. We've had some of those kids come to us years later and say, "Can I be baptized again? Because I didn't even know what I was doing. In fact, I just did it because my best friend did it." Different question, but that's what they came to us with. To be able to successfully complete any race, marathon or spiritual ones, we need to understand that preparation is just as important as finishing. Indeed, without proper preparation in the form of training, finishing is never going to become a reality. And again, I put conquering first. Ask anyone who's ever painted or done any job. It is getting all of it together that is the biggest hurdle. After that, things go relatively easy. But preparation is not just to do something and hope for the best thing. It is obtaining and following a structured plan for success. Joshua 1:8 has these words, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success." God already knew to tell us that for us to be successful in our spiritual lives is going to take more than just ideas. Train for a marathon, and there are a plethora of expertly written books, each showcasing the author's ultimate training workout plan. We've all seen it. We've probably followed some of them. Dieting is the same. Stock market. I do stock market sometimes, or I look at it and I study it. I like looking at that kind of thing. And it's always, there's a million guys telling you how to do it, and their way is the only way to make money. But for Christians, there's only one book. There's one book we need to be successful. The Bible. And it's where our preparation begins, by studying it day and night and meditating on it so that we can know it well enough to formulate a plan of training and dedication to what it means, or to what it means to follow the Lord. And then how to train to succeed. Train for a marathon with sneakers bought at Walmart. Trust me, been there. It does not end well. You will get shin splints. You will get all sorts of things happening. You need to go to a shoe fitter and fit one for your pronation or antination, whatever your foot is, that has enough cushioning for your feet. That's the beginning. Now there's other things, but those things. Train for spiritual life, and you need one thing that is the correct thing. Now, using man-made books in order to study and train for a spiritual marathon will end up confusing us. There are just as many books on spirituality. Just go to any bookstore Everybody's got a plan. Everybody's got how to study the Bible, how to do this. You know how you study the Bible? Open up the Bible, start studying it. If you want to know, start with the book of John. Go to the book of Acts. Go to all the other books. When I was, some of you know, well, you won't know, but I obviously come from a charismatic background. I was raised non-practicing Catholic, and then I was charismatic. When I was in the small African-American college in Terrell, Texas, I was going to be there for 2 years and leave. And Dr. James Maxwell came to me once and said, just read it like you never read it before. Study it like you've never seen it before. Take everything you've ever learned, get rid of it, just read it, and he told me which books to read, and then come and recite it to him. I did, and that's why I'm here. I used the one book. I'm not saying don't use other books. I use them every day in my study. We all use them. I'm not saying don't look at books that are motivational in it. But if you look at those in place of the Bible, you're never going to succeed in that spiritual marathon that we have. It'll end up hurting like shin splints do to a runner. And it'll result in you possibly giving up. If you've ever had shin splints, trust me, if that's happening in the middle of a race, you are not finishing. That's the same with our spiritual lives. Those shin splints of not being prepared is what's going to make you fall. Make sure that you have the proper equipment, good shoes for running, and a Bible for living. And let me just say, as a side note, there are good Bibles and there are Bibles. There are Bibles that are confusing. If you've ever picked up an Amplified Bible, nothing wrong with Amplified Bible in terms of what its message is. But it can be pretty confusing reading it because it keeps giving you 3 different meanings or 3 different words, and you know which one is the right one. So we just take a good Bible, take a good pair of shoes and start. 2 Timothy 3:16 is our core. All scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. You need to be equipped for what it is you're going to do in life. And for us, the Bible is the equipment we need for so many things. With a plan in place and the right gear, practice is obviously word of the day. We would run, my brother-in-law and I, 6 to 7 days of a week for months. We'd have a specific runner's diet to prepare our bodies for the grueling races of the season. And the same goes for our spiritual race. Have a plan and put it into practice. For us, it begins with a diet of studying the Bible and praying daily in order to prepare ourselves for baptism and what comes beyond. Baptism is not the end of it. There's so many people that I've come across. I've counseled people that somehow they have this notion that when you're baptized, it's all good. In fact, there's a tradition in this country, all over the world, that has that once saved, always saved notion. And when you get to that moment, that's it. It's done. Does that mean I can do whatever I want afterwards? Well, the argument then is if you do, you were never saved in the beginning. So how do I know I'm saved? So I love about the Church of Christ. I know when I'm saved. It's not a guessing game. I do something wrong in 10 years and go, whoa, apparently I never was saved. Even if I thought I was. The one other thing we need to conquer the first stage of training is discipline. We would have to run in all kinds of weather because you didn't know what the day of the race was going to bring you. And you'd have to train and train and train to get your lungs prepared and to get your body prepared and to get your stamina. And we knew that there would be things rearing its ugly head on that day that we would have to face. So we just kept on. Christianity takes that same kind of discipline. Too often we grow weary from life's problems and we just don't study or pray. Sometimes for a day, sometimes for days or weeks. And for some people, months, and for few, forever. They just give up because it just becomes too hard. No, in fact, not only we know it's not hard, we actually promised it's going to be hard. We need to develop the discipline to study even when we don't feel like it, to pray even when we're tired. Kids would come to me and say, Cleve, I feel so bad. Last night I fell asleep praying. If you fall asleep praying, knock yourself out. You were praying. God knows your heart. I think He's pretty happy that you were praying before you fell asleep. Now, probably sleep some more so that you can, or maybe, quit watching TV, pray a little early, you won't fall asleep. But it's not the worst thing that happens if you fall asleep when you're praying. At least you're praying. If you fall asleep studying the Bible, reading the Bible, go ahead. I had one lecturer who used to say that his kids always used to struggle to sleep. So we just put them down and gave them a sermon. And they would all fall asleep in 5 minutes. There's not a preacher in the world, myself included, who has not spoken and watched someone sleep. It's not offensive. I don't know what your day was like. I don't know if you're tired. I don't know if you're feeling ill. I'm glad that you're there. And let me tell you something just on that. There was a friend of mine, Donald Coates. He was a big strapping lad. This guy was 6'7". He was probably 350 pounds. Massive guy. He'd sit with us every day in class and he would fall asleep. And he'd fall asleep and then after a while he would just stay down. But if that lecturer said to him, Donald, what did I just say? Go, oh, you were just talking about Paul. And how did he know? So I've always never questioned if you fall asleep. I just trust that you're listening subconsciously anyway. For those of us, by the way, already in the race, and that's probably most of us here, if not all except for Peyton, training does not stop. It didn't stop for us and it doesn't stop for us in spiritual lives either. It actually increases as we try and reach goals that we were previously unable to reach. Okay, so you had a plan, you had the book, you trained, you've been disciplined, you taught yourself discipline, and you reached the day of the race. For us, the day of that initial race would have been baptism. Remember, now, number 2, we are now competing. Remember, training and discipline do not stop after the first race. But first, we have to compete in the first race. It's nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking for Christians. When you come out of the water, I don't know how you felt. When I come out of the water, I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if I was expecting a new me. Now there's a new spiritual me. But the me came out and still had the same issues I had before going in. There was still a lack of money. That didn't go away. I was going to get persecuted by my family. That was never going to go away. But I was not confused about. But I've genuinely have counseled people that were upset because when they came up out of the water of baptism, things didn't change. Do you know, everything changes, but it changes with you. It's not some magic bullet, and when you go up under, you come out with a different attitude, and that's what changes everything else. God does not take away the mountains that you were following. You're not suddenly going to be healthy for the rest of your life. You're going to win the lottery. Don't play the lottery. But you're going to do all these things that everything's just going to work out fine. Your miserable husband, your miserable wife, just going to be happy from that day on. You come up with a new attitude and a new goal, and that's what changes everything and makes everything better. Okay, so we need the discipline, and we're about to face challenges we did not think we have to face in training. I don't care how well you train for a marathon or for bicycle riding or for whatever it is you're training for. I'm college, university. You go through all those years of training. You get your first job, and something's going to happen that somehow you wouldn't train for. You're going to run. You're going to find out that running with 12,000 people was not the same as running with your brother-in-law. People start knocking you. They start tripping you because they try and pass you and they're too close to you. You suddenly have a sore stomach. What are some of the ones I mentioned? Thousands of runners' headaches. Been there. Thirst. Tired muscles. Cramps. Are all challenges that can come up against you that you probably didn't train for specifically. But there's another one that faces Christians and runners and all sports people alike. And that is doubt. If I asked you to put up your hands, don't, it's rhetorical, but if I ask you to put up your hands, have you ever doubted God? Most people would go, you don't really want to put up your hand because you want God to know that you've ever doubted Him, because God doesn't know those things. We all have. We have all been there. You can put up your hand freely because there's no one, no preacher, no one who can honestly say that there's never been a day that they went, is it? Or a young man, I think I told you last time, I'll tell you again. Young man, Tyler Bush, was in ministry, in my youth ministry. And he's a minister now, very successful. He had that moment where he came to me at camp and said, I'm just having doubt. Is there God? That's okay. You said it last time, I think, Nick. It's okay to question. Question. Because question gives us answers. Question means that we're sitting where we're sitting. We didn't just take whoever said whatever they wanted to somewhere in the charismatic church and went with it. Doubt isn't bad. Giving in to the doubt, that is bad. But runners have perseverance because they're trained for it. So you go through it. You go through the 8-mile block. It was a 14-kilometer block when I was in. It's just like a wall that comes up against you. For Christians, hardships are guaranteed. John 15:18-20. If the world hates you, know that it hated me before you. If you were of the world would love you its own. But you are not of the world, because I chose you out of the world. Therefore, the world hates you. And then he says, remember the word I said to you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. We will face hardships. We will face things we didn't think we would have to. I faced my parents, or one of my parents at least, turning on me. The world will grow mountains for us to overcome. And if you think you can overcome it, it'll make the mountain higher. It'll keep water from you when you are thirsty. And it will push you to the ground by tripping you. And it will trample you in an attempt to dissuade you from continuing on and from finishing the race. If we have studied the scriptures and meditate on the world, we will have the defenses necessary to overcome the difficulties we will surely face during our lengthy run. Paul tells Timothy in chapter 4 of the second book of Timothy, be ready in season and out of season. Of course, that was meant for Timothy to be ready to practice, to preach, reprove, rebuke, and exhort. But that goes for us as well. Be ready in season and out of season. It's all part of the training. To train year-round to be ready to face any challenge that arises. But also for us to be able to speak out. Paul would constantly ask us, or people constantly would ask me as a runner, why run? Why do that? Why put yourself through that misery every week? And sometimes it is misery. Because of what we knew what was coming. We would list for them the benefits of a healthy lifestyle, of the psychological strength attained from finishing a race and practicing for it. And not to mention the euphoria of doing so. Some would listen, and later we would see them starting a race with us. Some ignored the answer, and some didn't even care to ask in the first place. Isn't that the same for us? Some ask, some we approach, some listen, some don't. Some just don't care. Christians should always be prepared to speak of why we do what we do, why we are Christians. And for those times, we need to be prepared. 1 Peter 3:15, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason of the hope that is in you. You can never bring someone to the Lord if you cannot ask them that question. Proper training leads to properly trained runners. But we will need to persevere because there will be times when we grow weary. And of course, the Bible has words for us about that as well. Let us not grow weary in doing well. For in due season we shall reap if we do not give up. Galatians 6:8. Don't give up. It is during those times that we need to push on. The times when we are tired, our muscles hurt, we are thirsty, and the inevitable cramps set in. and then doubt comes with it. It is during those times that the one who perseveres will push through the pain, the tiredness, the cramps, and the doubt. And you will then achieve what you have worked so many months, and for us, so many years to achieve. It's all part of the discipline, and it's all part of the needed training that brings us to the point where we can compete. 1 Corinthians 9:24-27. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one, listen to that quickly, only one receives the prize. So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating in the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Now it is true that in life, only one receives the first prize place. But for Christians, finishing is first place for everyone. Then lastly, excuse me, we need to complete. If we've conquered through training, changed our attitude, changed our mindset, done what needed to be done, we compete, we also need to complete the race. What's the point if you remember the woman who almost got there and then didn't? You know how many Christians can go through years and years and years, and then something happens. Something tragic sometimes, a loss of a loved one, someone divorcing you through no fault of your own. Your health just gives up. And then they leave, they become angry with God. They were that close. I understand people who never do. I find it much harder to understand people who have it and then give it up. We need to endure during the race that we can be found worthy of the medal that waits us at the finish line. It's what kept me going sometimes when it was tough as nails. When you were going up a mountain, and it was literally a mountain, and it never seems to go to the top. And every cyclist, every runner, if you've ever done any of those things, there are two things you hate. Downhill. Everybody always thinks downhill's fun. Downhill of 1 degree is fun. Downhill of 5 degrees is just breaking all the way down, and that's where you're going to get shin splints. And then the other thing. You come around a corner and you see 3 miles of straight. And you know that there's a guy at the other end, just jogging along like it doesn't matter. And you are dying. And you still have to get to that end. What's worse, by the way, in Africa, is you would have Ethiopians and Nigerians finish the whole marathon. Now, I was doing half marathon, okay? They did the whole marathon and passed us in a warm down before we finished the half marathon. Literally, you want to take that person and throttle them. Because they're also running 3 times the speed you could ever run it. And they just casually talking to each other. I was never in contention for the gold or silver medal. In fact, I wasn't even intentional for the bronze. I'm this short and my feet are that long. These are not runner's body. But I love doing it. But I would get a copper-colored medal and sometimes a t-shirt. And that achievement, that sense of achievement is hard to describe to people that have never done it. I remember crying after finishing the first race and some others. The joy was indescribable. Imagine the joy for those who endure and finish the race. Should we not be crying the joy of being who we are in Christ? And I don't mean out in the streets, making a spectacle of yourself. I mean privately, even inwardly, crying with this pure joy of who we are and what was done for us. The hard work, the conquering was actually done for us. The actual hard work. Hebrews 10:36, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. That's what we are running for, that promise. And what was promised, if not a crown? James 1:12, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, You will receive the crown of life which God has promised to all those who love Him. That's what we're running for. You know a funny thing? Actually, it's a sad thing. After all that training, after all that discipline, the pain, the suffering, the enduring, the overcoming the doubts, overcoming moments I thought I was genuinely not going to make the end of it. The elation at receiving the medals in that t-shirt. I cannot find any of them anymore. With all the moving we've done in our life, they're just gone. I remember the memories, but I have none of them anymore. But it doesn't really matter that much, because the race I'm in now is more than that. They were perishable. Obviously, they're gone now. Probably in some dump somewhere and was melted or whatever. But the wreath I'm running for now, the crown of life, is not made of metal, gold, silver, or bronze. It is made of an imperishable material that I will wear for eternity. So let's look at the prize for those who have never conquered, competed or completed. Those who dropped out and did not restart. They become enemies of the cross, Philippians 3:18. And their reward is clearly stated in Philippians 3:19. Their end is destruction. Their God is their belly, and their glory is in their shame. Their minds are set on earthly things. Their prize is on this world. Our prize is in the next one to come. To the winners go the spoils. To all who finish are winners. Whether you come dead last in a marathon, you still finished. There's still a sense of elation. In Christianity, we all finish, we all become first. What do we get? Citizenship. Some medal, citizenship, Philippians 3:20. But our citizenship is in heaven. There, the Lord Jesus Christ. And we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ. And then Hebrews 4:4. Therefore, while the promise of entering His rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. The promise of entering His rest, that's when we rest. We don't need to rest now. We're still running. The rest will come. When the marathon's finished, we rested. But we needed to continue lest we fail to reach it. So in closing, our happily ever after is not necessarily in this life with all its complications. Sure, we can be happy and we should be happy. And we ought to find that happiness. But the happily ever after, as seen in fairy tales, where all is good and nothing ever goes wrong, is actually a reality only for Christians upon our passing. Can you imagine the joy when we stand before the Father and receive that ultimate prize? When we are awarded the crown of righteousness for all we have endured and eventually get to the finishing line, or having gotten to the finish line. That, my friends, is the actual, ultimate, happily ever after. If any of you are subject to the invitation today, we ask you to come forward, and if there's anything else you want to bring to the church, that's always well. And if you want to place membership here, some of the ones are not here. We're actually speaking to some live today for those who are not able to attend today. And we ask that you come forward as we sing the invitation song.